Hey guys, not in my car at the moment, as you can see, but I want to make another video. There's something that's been bothering me a bit that I've been wanting to make a video about, and that is the current situation with Andrew Tate. Realized that he is quite the controversial character, and it seems with a lot of these people who are controversial characters, there's often a couple narratives at play. Obviously, Trump is a prime example of a controversial character. And I feel like, me personally, I never really liked Trump. For example purposes, I never really liked Trump, to be honest. But I felt that, at a certain point in time, there was like two clear-cut narratives that were created about him. Basically, like he was an absolute terrible person, or he was a good person. He was either a good guy or a bad guy. And everybody basically fell into one or two camps. Either you thought he was a good guy or you thought he was a bad guy. First of all, again, when you just put somebody into one of these two categories without leaving any room for error, if you will, it's quite naive in my opinion, because people are very rarely either purely good or purely bad. We all have good and bad within us. And anyone who doesn't admit to that is simply lying to themselves. So anyhow, I don't want to go on too much of a rant about that, but I think that it's very rare that somebody is like plainly in the box of being bad or being good. There's obviously many cases where people are plainly bad or mostly good, but I feel those are typically the exception and not the rule. So with the situation with Andrew Tate is pretty much like a completely unknown person, at least to me, until very recently. And according to his own account, he's only gone viral within the last 6 months. And it's very interesting to me, especially like a lot of my guy friends really have a problem with him, and I can't quite figure out exactly why. So it's sort of interesting to me, honestly, just from a purely understanding perspective, if you will, as to why so many people have a problem with him. I totally understand why a lot of women have an issue with him and a lot of feminists, because he has been labeled a misogynist, and that's the main thing that I see them attacking him on, is that they say he's a misogynist and he represents toxic masculinity, which I heard Joe Rogan and Dave Portnoy say, which I strongly disagree with. I have heard him say a couple of comments that I did find a little bit misogynistic, which I do strongly disagree with. But for the most part, I really haven't heard him say anything misogynist. He says that, younger women are more beautiful than older women. Like a 20-year-old girl is hotter than a 25-year-old girl. I don't personally agree with that, but I understand where he's coming from. And I don't think that that's misogynistic. That's maybe ageist, as he said. I agree with that. It's definitely ageist, but it's not misogynistic. I think you have to understand what misogyny really means before we start throwing labels on these kind of things. But anyhow, whether we think he's an asshole, he's a complete douchebag, or he has a positive message, I actually, part of the reason why I am admittedly taking his side in this situation is because I do agree with a lot of what he said, and he's spoken out about a lot of the corruption from the pandemic. He's spoken out a lot about the corruption of society and what he and I also call the matrix, which is simply, the false system of beliefs, narratives, institutions that have been put in place by society to create, a status quo, kind of a civilized society, if you will. And I actually am not surprised by these recent allegations against him that he's, a human trafficker, that he's a rapist, blah, 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 because this was kind of expected, because He's speaking out against a lot of these things that society does not want anyone speaking out against. Society does not want people bringing to light all of the corruption, all of the deception, all of the manipulation that went on during the pandemic, telling people about this virus was the most deadly thing in all of creation when lo and behold, the death rate is, 0.25% overall or 0.05% for anybody under 40. Telling everybody to take a vaccine, telling everybody to wear a mask, et cetera, et cetera. He's speaking out against that, so he and I are on the exact same page with that. He's speaking out against the matrix in terms of, society molding people's mentalities to live a certain lifestyle. You have to get a certain type of job. You have to get married by a certain age. You have to have a family so that you can be a contributing member of society. Otherwise, you're an outcast. Otherwise, people won't value you, etc., etc. So, for example, in my current society, if you will, where I grew up, there was this underlying notion that everyone needed to become as successful as possible, i.e., become a lawyer, doctor, investment banker, or something very closely related to one of those fields, one of those professions, something where, aka, you're going to make a lot of money. Okay? I'm sorry, but this is bullshit. Again, apologize for the language, but sometimes I have to say some of these words that we don't normally say in order to feel that I'm adequately expressing myself. I do apologize for anyone who is not a fan of the language. I understand. I don't mean it to offend anyone. But, some of these notions are just complete nonsense. That you have to make $250,000 a year. You have to make $500,000 a year. Otherwise, you're a failure. This is not a good mindset. It's not true by any means. And that's actually, that's actually a good point. That's something that I actually disagree with Tate on quite strongly. He keeps talking about this notion of, you have to get rich, you have to have $10 million in the bank, you've got to have, 10 exotic cars in your driveway, you've got to have 10 exotic women in your backyard having a barbecue. These are superficial, values. I do understand the benefit to having money because it provides freedom. And I do agree with Tate in the sense that he said you need money so that you can have a platform to speak from. Totally agree with that. But, there's a lot of misconception around material wealth. We mostly don't need a lot of these, material things. Like nobody needs a Lamborghini. Nobody needs a 10,000 square foot house. Nobody needs to eat caviar for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, So it's really like all things in life, there's a delicate balance, and it's all about finding the right balance. So, of course you should strive for success and you should strive to make money, but it's not the end all and be all. There's other things in life that are important. Anyhow, the point that I'm making is that now, they've said that Andrew Tate and his brother, are guilty of human trafficking and of rape and of trying to create an organized crime unit. So the main thing for me, and this is going to sound somewhat conceited, somewhat egotistical, but I just really trust my ability to read people. And I think that I can often see the good in people and the bad in people and a combination of both. And I do not see any ounce of evil or pure badness in either Andrew Tate, his brother, or his cousin. I just don't see it. And so at the same time, Tate is on social media. He has now, in the last 6 months, gained a huge amount of followers, millions and millions of followers. So he's got a huge audience that he's speaking to, and he's speaking out against the matrix. He's speaking out against the societal norms. He's speaking out against the corruption from the pandemic that went on during the pandemic. Of course, they're going to try to cancel him. So now they accuse him of being a rapist, a human trafficker, etc., but yet they hadn't produced a single shred of evidence. A single shred of evidence. And then you've got people like Joe Rogan and Dave Portnoy who, I'm sorry, have their head up their ass on this, saying that he represents toxic masculinity. This is not toxic masculinity when he's telling people to go out and be the best version of themselves. When he's telling guys that they need to go to the gym every day until they have a six pack. When he's telling guys they need to work as hard as possible to be as successful as possible in their business life, in their personal life, with their health, with their family. Telling people to be a good person, to literally die for the woman that you're with in the worst case scenario. He says, if I'm with my girlfriend or my wife and I'm attacked on the street, God forbid, by 10 men with knives, it's my duty and my honor to stand there and try to fight, right? Someone who's like evil, someone who's human trafficking, they don't say those kind of things. And even Dave Portnoy and Joe Rogan also say that. They're like, somebody who's engaged in those type of activities, in those type of activities, doesn't typically preach these type of messages. So when somebody like Andrew Tate, who obviously again is a controversial character, but from my perspective is a good-hearted individual, when someone like that is being accused of these type of high crimes, you need to stop and pause and reflect and think about it. Like, it just doesn't add up, okay? And you have to also think about the fact that there is a motive here, because he's speaking out against the Matrix. He's speaking out against, and when I say the Matrix, I just mean society. He's speaking out against all of these things that society wants people to believe. So is it really that far-fetched for people to think that they could wrongfully accuse him of a crime to try to silence him because they don't like what he's saying? And normally it wouldn't be a big deal. Like, for example, for me, for the most part, as long as I don't say, the magic word, they don't give a fuck what I say because I don't have a platform to stand on. I don't have a big enough following. So they don't really care what I say. But somebody like Tate, he's got, 10 million followers, 20 million followers, whatever it is. They worry when he starts to say something like this, when he starts to speak out against society, when he starts to tell people, hey, wake up, you guys were just lied to for the last 3 years, about a virus that wasn't what they told you it was, about, a medicine that wasn't what they told you it was, about wearing a mask that wasn't what they told you it was. And I know a lot of people are still in denial about these things. They just can't accept it. They don't want to admit it to themselves. But there was a lot of deception. There were a lot of mistakes made by doctors and scientists, unfortunately. And that's fine. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. But people need to accept the truth that, the mainstream narrative isn't really in line with reality. And so here we go again with one of these controversial characters, Andrew Tate. And the mainstream narrative is not in line with with reality. He's not a human trafficker. He's not a rapist. Show me 1 ounce of evidence that he is a rapist, that he is a human trafficker. And I don't want hearsay. I want video proof. I want hard evidence that he's committed these crimes. Otherwise, like everyone, he is entitled to a fair trial, and he should be innocent until proven guilty. But a lot of people are assuming that he's guilty before being proven innocent. That he's guilty before being proven guilty. Everybody should be innocent until proven innocent. Innocent until proven guilty. So this is something I think that we should all think about, and don't just jump to immediate conclusions about people. Wait until you see all the evidence. You never really know someone's true intentions. You never know their true character until you at least sit down and have a conversation with them, or really listen to what they have to say for an extended period of time. So in summary, there is a motive here to cancel him. Society does not like that he's speaking out against society, aka the Matrix, and a lot of the mistakes that society has made. They don't like that he has such a large following. And so if they're going to wrongfully convict him of a crime, that's a perfect way to get rid of him. If you look back in history, and again, I've mentioned this time and time again, if you look back in history, that's what you can expect is going on now. And throughout history, anybody who they want silenced, anybody who they didn't agree with, Jesus, was it Galileo, Socrates, all of these people who they didn't like the narrative that they were saying, they simply got rid of it. They either wrongfully accused them of a crime or they simply killed them, because that's just the most effective method. So, I think we really need to think long and hard about who we assume is guilty before they've been proven guilty. And if you don't like Andrew Tate, you think he's a misogynist, or you think he represents toxic masculinity, okay, that's your right to believe that. But to automatically assume that he's guilty of these crimes that they say he is, it's a very naive mindset to have. You really need to have hard evidence before you assume anyone is guilty of such crimes. Hope you guys like this video. I will be back again with another video as soon as possible. Hope everybody has a good night.